Let justice roll down. 4 important words that when put together mean something. Let justice roll down. A piece of poetic imagery, a quote by Martin Luther King Jr., a Bible passage from Amos 5:24. Let justice roll down. A dream, a prayer, a statement. Let justice roll down is also a message for all of us. It's actually a message dating back as far as 760 BC, right through to here in the year 2020. But before we go for a trip down memory lane, let us centre on the year 2020. We've been through a lot, haven't we? From the bushfires to COVID-19, to floods, to Aboriginal deaths in custody and the global Black Lives Matter movement, to living through a global climate crisis. I turned 40 years old this year in 2020, and for the first time in 40 years, I celebrated my birthday on Zoom. George Floyd died on my 40th birthday. I wonder, where do you place yourself right now in the year 2020? Tonight, our stories weave together. We've been brought together in this very moment as you listen to my dreams, my prayers, my statements. You'll listen to the call on my heart as it calls to yours, calling through truths, stories, and reframes. Calling through my lifetime, colliding into your lifetime, and challenging us in our lifetime. So let's go back to that trip down memory lane. Martin Luther King Jr. quoted Amos 5:24 in full. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, in his letter from a Birmingham jail written on the 16th of April, 1963. Tonight, I actually could have just read Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter in full, because whilst written in 1963 and for the context of the United States of America, it has application to the year 2020, application to these lands now called Australia, and application to each one of us, to you and to me. I encourage you to actually go and read his letter in full. And you know, Martin Luther King Jr. has long been an inspiration for me. And I learned his I Have a Dream speech off by heart in year 12 at high school when we studied the American Civil Rights Movement. Sadly, I didn't learn in school of our own Aboriginal civil rights leaders or of Aboriginal history, our own Aboriginal leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. But more on those Aboriginal leaders shortly. For a long time, I've also been inspired by Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." That quote actually comes from the same letter from a Birmingham jail. And to put into perspective a timeline on Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, it was delivered 4 months after this letter, on the 28th of August 1963. And then Martin Luther King Jr.'s I've Been to the Mountaintop speech was delivered 5 years later after that, on the 3rd of April 1968, the day before he was killed. Killed for dreaming of justice, killed for praying for justice, killed for making statements on justice. Following his quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," Martin Luther King Jr. follows that sentence with this: We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. This is why tonight isn't just about Martin Luther King Jr. It's not just about me. It's about all of us. I wonder, do you know the name of William Cooper? If you know his name, do you know his story? If you know his story, have you read his letters? He was a prolific letter writer. Martin Luther King Jr. makes a call to the white moderate. William Cooper makes a call to apathetic white people. And tonight I call to 97.2% of the Australian population. We are calling to you through the generations. Over the last few years, I've shared this non-exhaustive list of injustices that have faced Aboriginal peoples, injustices in these lands now called Australia. Tonight I share them with you. As you listen, please put aside feelings of overwhelmedness, distrust, and questions, because they're the things that are preventing us seeing justice in our lifetime. I hope you can focus your heart, take a posture of lament, and find hope in the action as we centre on the statement, "Let justice roll down." Stolen land, invasion, dispossession, lack of treaty and treaties, massacres, genocide, ecological destruction, lack of recognition of the frontier wars, stolen wages, slavery, poverty, stolen generations, loss of languages, forced removal from homelands, lack of return of ancestral remains, lack of protection and destruction of sacred sites, the new stolen generation, stolen lives, lack of closing the gap, life expectancy gaps, high rates of suicide, high rates of prison incarceration, high rates of juvenile detention, not consulting or respecting Aboriginal people's environmental rights, lack of a National Truth-Telling Commission, lack of implementation of the statement from the heart, Aboriginal deaths in custody, trauma, discrimination, racism. These are the foundational injustices in these lands now called Australia. The past is actually many of these instances, but it's actually still here in the very present. Stolen land might have occurred in 1770, but it is still a lived reality today. The past affects the present. Stolen wages was a real events that occurred in many of our elders' lives. These elders are still alive today and still fighting to see the money they did hard labour for without being paid a cent from the age of 10 years old. And if we don't take action, these injustices will affect our future. The 339 recommendations from the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody still await implementation. Their implementation will prevent Aboriginal people dying. I've talked about the year 2020 being a wake-up moment for Australians, and we've actually had many wake-up moments, but I'm claiming 2020 as the wake-up moment. And I've been calling for Australians to actually stay awake, because the previous times that there's been these wake-up moments, Australians have fallen back to sleep. My prayer is that 2020 becomes our wake-up moment where we stay awake. But if you think this is just the social trend of the moment, the latest thing of 2020, the woke moment for woke people, you haven't listened deeply enough. This is not a social trend. It's not the latest thing. This is not a woke moment for woke people. It is your wake-up moment where you stay awake and hear the stories, calls and cries, in fact, screams across 2.5 centuries in these lands now called Australia, but actually across millennia, across the entire world, including 2,000 years ago when a man named Jesus walked this earth. Remember I said I didn't learn about the great Aboriginal leaders through my schooling? You probably didn't either. So if this is the first time you've heard William Cooper's name, or if you think it is an injustice to actually be called a white moderate, an apathetic white person, come and sit down with me for a while and let's talk about incredible Aboriginal people who held the dream and the prayer, made statements and took action to let justice roll down. Or actually, maybe just start with Googling them. And so we remember Cooman, Bennelong, Barangaroo, Pemulwuy, Truganini, Jandamara, William Cooper, Pearl Gibbs, Albert Namatjira, Sir Pastor Doug Nicholls, Vincent Lingiari, Udjuru Noonuccal, Charlie Perkins, and also those that have died at the hands of injustice. John Patt, Cameron Doomadgee, Mr. Ward, Miss Dew, Wayne Fella Morrison, David Dungay Jr., Tanya Day. And maybe you might even need to Google Jesus and justice. I know I didn't become a Christian until I was 21 years old, I thought I'd never been told about Jesus and his calls for action for justice. But actually I had. Remember I said I learnt the words of that I Have a Dream speech off by heart? Well, I realised when I became a Christian, I hadn't listened deeply enough to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And then I heard the stories of Jesus and justice strengthened through the stories, voices and writings of William and Catherine Booth, and today through great Aboriginal Christian leaders like Auntie Jean Phillips. Let us not forget injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I've asked myself the question throughout my entire life, will I see justice in my lifetime? But actually, if I'm honest, I haven't spent much time asking the question. I've just been driven by my actions to see justice in my lifetime. I've been driven by this and have taken action since the age of 11 years old when I suffered racism and was told a racist Aboriginal joke to put me down, to put me in a place. One of the places I've actually seen hope in these lands now called Australia is through Common Grace. In the year 2020, I became the CEO of this movement, but have been part of the movement from when it launched 6 years ago. And this is where it's not just about me. Common Grace is a movement of peoples pursuing Jesus and justice. We collectively envision and work towards a world where we are led by Aboriginal Christian leaders to see friendship and reconciliation in our lifetime, where those who come to our shores for safety and asylum are welcomed with compassion, where there is an end to the epidemic of violence against women and churches and faith communities are safe places for victims of domestic and family violence, where even in the midst of a climate crisis, God's beautiful creation is protected and restored. This is part of hope, my hope, because people keep joining the movement. We are a growing movement. You can be part of this movement. And why is there hope? Because together, I feel less tired and less alone. Together, we feel less tired and less alone. And so I ask, can we see justice in our lifetime? Yes, but I need your help. Your help comes in the form of listening, learning, accepting the invitations, taking action for justice. My biggest light bulb moment, or maybe even heartbreak, or maybe it's my staying awake moment in the year 2020, has been as an Aboriginal woman. I'm part of 2.8% of the Australian population who is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. I've dedicated my life to seek justice, but I need the rest of the 97.2% of Australians to seek justice with me. I need you. Can we see justice in our lifetime? Yes, but it's actually, we need to stop asking the question and instead let's make it a statement. Let us see justice in our lifetime. This is the dream, the prayer, a statement. Will it be your statement, or will you continue to be a white moderate who stays stuck in the questions? Why can't they just move on and get over it? Is now really the right time to be protesting? Shouldn't all lives matter? Let us see justice in our lifetime. Let justice roll down. Will it be a statement that you allow as words to spill from your own mouth as you have conversation with your friends, your family, your work colleagues? It does mean taking action, individual action and collective action. It means saying, I will do something to make a difference. Often, it is the one truth, the one story, the one reframe, that you are away from clearly seeing your place in the struggle, the path before you, and the call on your heart. Will it be the one truth of the injustices that Aboriginal peoples have faced for over 250 years, like stolen land, stolen wages, and the massacres? Will it be the one story of one of those Aboriginal people I named earlier, like Barangaroo, Albert Namatjira, or Tanya Day? Will it be the one reframe, no longer a question, but a statement? Let us see justice in our lifetime. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.